Okay, I retired in June, but I've done early childhood before that for over 30 years. And I was shocked when we moved here 3 years ago that Waterford did not have 4K. Okay, if you even logistically, as Matt mentioned, go online and see, every surrounding district has it. Okay, so the cost of living, when you look at the statistics from the state, is higher in Waterford than it is in Burlington, Muskego, Mugwanago, Waukesha. Okay, well, if parents, if you want to, as you said, be a destination community, and parents are making a decision, I know when my daughter looked, there was a house they liked in Muskego, which had a 4K, which she would have purchased, except they couldn't negotiate with the seller. Okay, so they ended up buying in Waterford. But that was one of her considerations. Obviously, I'm beyond that consideration. But I think the point is, it's misguided to say, what can you teach 4-year-olds? Okay. I mean, we used to think you could leave a baby in a crib and you didn't have to stimulate them because they weren't absorbing any information. Okay, that has been disproved in the last 50 years. The earlier you stimulate kids, you know, the better it is, the more you introduce to them early on, you know, the better, as you said, the brain absorbs the knowledge. And today I was working at one of the, I was subbing in one of the kindergarten rooms and in Waterford. And I don't know how many people are aware of what the curriculum is. I mean, the teacher was using, you know, the smart board, and these were 5-year-olds, and the sentence was up there, whether it was 6 lines long, and they had to identify the words, and then they had to determine whether they needed a period at the end or a question mark, and the concepts, DPI has forced the school districts to increase what they're introducing to children at 5. I mean, they don't go to kindergarten anymore just to socialize. And I've also worked in the 4K title program as a substitute. And if these kids come in and they can't cut and they don't know how to socially interact, it's going to put them behind the 8 ball. And I mean, to me, one of the big things all those years was the kids' self-image. And if they cannot perform and they don't know how to use scissors and they don't know how to cooperate, it doesn't bode well, and you can see more and more emotional problems.
What school district did you work in?
The last one was Racine.
Racine?
Yeah.
Well, Waterford High School is one of the better high schools in the country. They rate among the top 2,000, I believe. I'm sorry?
1,000.
Top 1,000, I'm sorry.
Right.
So I guess it hasn't hurt them in the past not to have a 4K, but I could see its advantages.
And I guess
for
I
Racine or
to say
lower income.
it's kind of hard to compare the kids who are seniors now, because I mean, when my kids were little, I didn't work those years and I stayed home. I just don't see that as an option for a lot of families today to offer that. And so, I mean, if you could project, okay, if we don't give these kids this opportunity now, and in 12 years, how will they test? I mean, that's just the unknown.
Yeah, but they've had 4K for 30 years now, so there has to be documentation. So why is our schools doing better? To me, it shows that it's more that your kids are going to do better in school the more the parents are involved. It doesn't matter. And look, you probably got it in Milwaukee. Look at what they're doing with their schools. Their schools are falling apart. You know, I mean, look at other areas in the state that have 4K and where they're testing compared to our schools. Your education is at the level that your parents are involved in your education is the lion's share of whether or not you're going to get a good education.
Right, but I guess I learned by looking at when the school board changed the lunch program, and they had identified that 20% of the kids are entitled to free and reduced lunches. I guess I'd like to know what those statistics were 10 years ago. And I guess I don't think every parent who's out there is unemployed and not involved by choice today. okay? I think the economy dictates that, and I think we have a moral responsibility to, I mean, the big thing you see in schools all the time is, it takes a village to educate a child. And I guess I think that commitment is necessary, and I do see the advantages of, introducing this early. And I don't know if the statistics were that high, 10 years ago for how kids qualified, for things, for, let's say, state aid or whatever.
Okay, we have another hand up there.
I own a daycare in Waterford
Thank you for
for
coming.
about 20 years. I worked here 25 years. My concern with all of this, I have no concern, I'm fine with the 4K program. My concern was, I want, two concerns. I want the children to be taught social skills first before they're taught the other things. And my problem with going to the school system and putting those little 4-year-olds in with all the older kids, and that is that I'm leery whether they're going to get those social skills that the early childhood teachers have gone to school for and have learned how to do it. It's not just, and I will say, I heard a board member when I went to one of the school boards say, all the daycares are filled in Waterford. They don't have any problem. Well, whoever that lady was that said that did not do her work, because none of the daycares are filled in Waterford. We do not have waiting lists. And I'll be honest, if this goes through and it doesn't go through the preschools and daycares, we will go under. We will go under.
When you say it, you mean if it isn't a community model?
If it isn't a
Right.
community model. And so I'm not saying this that I feel that we could do a better job because of that, but my first thought was, I hope that they can do for the little ones the social skills that they need before they learn the other things that they need to learn. Because they need that. They don't always get that at home anymore. They don't get the empathy.
Yeah.
They aren't taught a lot of these things that they are taught in preschools and daycares.
As my daughter was in kindergarten last year, and my wife helped out weekly in the classroom, and I would hear a little bit of, what that was like. It really seemed obvious too that those are the skills that if they were there would allow that kindergarten teacher to be able to have more success. Not that it stops at kindergarten by any means, but I hear you. And then, in just 1 second, what I want you to keep in mind though is that I personally think the debate about if 4K is going to happen in Waterford is really over now. I think the question is, does it happen next year in 14-15 or the following year in 15-16? And I say that just based on the sentiment of a majority of school board members. The one school board member that is most opposed, Paul Viral, to any type of, he's actually the one of the 5 members that even voted against the Title I funded 4K program we have right now. He is not running for school board again. So that seat is up, and we can hear from both the candidates at the end here if you want. They can tell us about their positions on 4K, because one of these two gentlemen, Jordan, can you put your hand up? And then Tom are going to be taking Paul's seat. So, but the truth is, even without that seat, I think there's going to be a majority anyhow. So that is the kind of discussion I want to hear. And now, not everybody's comfortable speaking, but when you speak at a school board meeting, other people hear you, and now because they're recorded, a lot of people hear you. If you write a letter to the board or to the superintendent, you just don't know who's going to see it, or if the board, and when the board sees it, if it isn't part of their feelings, you don't know where it really goes from there. And that, fortunately, for 3 and 4 years, that has been the experience, as people have written the superintendent, written the school board, it hasn't gone anywhere.
And my director did email about this today.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's
to you.
good. And this is, this is just a start, and I hope the school board will pick it up. Maybe someone else will want to do one of these coming up and keep the ball rolling. I don't know. There was another hand, yeah.
I agree with the preschool teacher over there wholeheartedly, because I think a 4K program if it really was monitored for 4-year-olds. I don't think 4-year-olds are 5-year-olds. I think that they need a whole different premise. I do truly believe 4-year-olds belong at home. I realize that they can't all be there, but if they can't, they should be in a place where, number one, religion isn't outlawed, where some of the kindnesses and things that are given in most of the preschools that we have in this area. I think that's terrible that they say, well, you can't have this and that. You know, these are children. They need to learn very gentle, very kind, very self-growing things. And I would be very leery. I would not want my granddaughter going to a school, a regular graded school 4K.
But I
Now,
wanna
on
just-
the other hand,
Yeah.
St. Thomas runs one, St. Mary's in Burlington run one. Are those not going to be considered 4K then, once something like this comes into play?
I don't know, but I want to back up a little bit. Remember the one slide where it talked about 30% and 70% and 10%? Remember, that is just something that Burlington, that was actually the recommendation by the Burlington administration to the Burlington board, which they then approved. But those, what you're bringing up is so very important as we move forward, because you really are the experts. You are the ones that have been with 4-year-olds for a long time, and I believe your knowledge far surpasses that of anybody on the school board or really employed by the school district other than some teachers. So your input is vital in making this the best opportunity for those kids. And sitting down with the current kindergarten teachers probably to hear what their concerns are is probably another great way to start. Well, the religious aspect, you know, that's one that is kind of cut and dry. The current laws are that the state funding, at least through the state aid that school districts get, that wouldn't be part of that 3 hours. But what happens in the 4th hour, or the other 3 hours if the students are all day or whatever, obviously can get very creative with that. But it wouldn't, I guess it would not be able to be embedded throughout the 3 hours. Yeah.
And I don't know if it would need your mind or not, but to know that to teach in a 4K, you have to have certification in 4K in early childhood. It's a completely different degree, which is very sought after today. And I mean, even if you look at the recommendations from DPI, it says the newer studies best practice for young children supports a play-based curriculum that's rich in opportunities for social and emotional interaction, language and communication skill development, and acquisition of general knowledge. So it's not like they're taking a very intense math or reading program and putting it down to 4-year-olds. I mean, that's the whole thing about 4K should be the social, emotional development and learning to interact with each other and how to take notes. You know, just the basics of, like you say, they go into a preschool. And it is obvious, and I know from when it was implemented in Racine several years ago, it does have an impact on the preschools and the daycare centers and stuff. But this is not to be looked at as a babysitting service, which I think some people view, will say, well, why are we going to have to pay to babysit these kids when they, because it's only a half a day. So even if, when both parents work outside the home, the parents still are going to have to come up with, the other 7 hours or 6 hours of the day, and provide services for their children. That's why maybe in a community-based facility, again, you still have to have a DPI certified 4K teacher who instructs, for that 3 or 4 hours that the kids are there. But then for some parents, it would make it easier if it was a community-based center because, their child care arrangements would be easier, which doesn't always happen if you use, a public school facility.
I'm all for education, okay? I've been teaching now for 26 years. My fears are that it will be a washed down kindergarten classroom. Look what they've done to kindergarten. They've taken away their playtime, they've taken away their social time. They've made it an 8-hour or 6-hour day, whatever it is. That's my fear, is that it would turn into something like that. But I think every child deserves that education. I think there's families in our community that cannot afford to send their child to a preschool for that experience. So I think that there definitely is a need. Sounds like it's going to be happening. I would hope that the board or the community of whoever's on the planning committee, that they would incorporate people that have been doing this for many years to see what we do in our classrooms, what children need, and go from there, because I really do have that fear. I've heard things about Title I. I have not been in the classroom, so I'm not speaking from my own experience, but from what I've heard, it's not very age appropriate.
The current Title I program.
Yes, and I would not like to see that, and I know how the school is run, the grade schools, how much control is in there, and what teachers can and can't do. It's very difficult. I would hate to see that happen to 4-year-old children, because they're learning through play, and that's what they should be doing. And you teach them so many things at their age level. So it definitely has to be age appropriate, and it has to stay that way.
Yeah.
You can't, like, in 2 years say, okay, now we're going to start doing this. It has to stay that way.
And see, I guess I'm a person where I always view the glass as half full, but the 4 ladies that have spoken, what you know and the influence you could have, I think is tremendous. Obviously, we have to look at what are the requirements in a 4K district-wide program where state plan goes. But once we know that, and my understanding is it is quite flexible, then the rest gets dictated by the school district with the input of people like yourselves. And so it's time to get active, get your foot in the door and make your concerns heard, because those very first concerns are the ones that are going to leave the longest lasting impression. Sir?
Is there presently testing in the 4K program that you have taught in? Are there benchmarks or?
The title program, the 4-year-old title program that's in Waterford right now, they did establish a testing criteria, and I guess identified children they thought were more at risk.
I mean, is there a progress report kind of thing where?
Oh, yeah, I mean, these kids are, they go through the evaluations, and she has to do, the state requires something called PALS testing in all 4 and 5, and now it's even in the 1st grade.
So this will
Yeah.
eventually be part of Common Core and
Right,
in that
yeah.
whole program.
Right, so there's accountability, and I certainly empathize with the opinion that these programs have to be play-based. The curriculum, it has to just be play-based. It has to be centered. It has to be, it should not be sitting down working at worksheets,
Right,
treading
socializing.
pencil all day.
But we felt that way about kindergarten too. We felt kindergarten should be an introduction and a play-based situation and a half day. And then it was decided, well, maybe it should be a full day. And now it's gone way beyond what kindergarten originally was intended to be. And why won't 4-year-old, 4K be the same way? They lull you in with saying, we're just going to do this so nice and nice. And then as soon as it gets underway, nobody has any say in it anymore. And we find that in the whole deal with the schools.
Yeah, I see. It becomes too easy for parents to just enroll their kid in the free school district 4K instead of doing or paying for another option. And I think you get drowned out, is what you're saying could happen.
I'm afraid they're going to move it along the way they did. And I don't think it's doing children it's not doing them a service to rush them for their time. You look at so many of the other countries and the way they treat their school systems and at the age they introduce things, when they're 5 years old, they're very little. They don't need some of the things. Some children aren't ready at 5 to learn some of the things that they want them to. And is that going to put them in that category with, gee, I must be dumb, I can't do this? I resent that terribly with the way the school system is handling it. And that's why our children go to parochial school. At least we feel we have some say in the parochial school. At least they listen a little bit. I don't feel we have that with the public school. I really don't.
Well, I could tell you over the last several months how hard it was to get me, for me to get them to listen just about the dollars and cents of it. So I totally understand where you're coming from. But I was successful, and you can be too. You really can, but it's going to take work, and you're going to have to voice your opinions, and you're going to have to volunteer to be on, a study group or a committee or whatever, and communicate with others. There We have Parents United for Waterford Schools. We have the meetings website I do, the social networking. It's incredible how much information you get out of people. It really is. It's on hand over here, yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm a mom who was working about a month ago, and now staying home, have 4 kids, and fortunately have the opportunity to keep my kids home. I could, but I'm here because I would like to send my 4-year-old 4K. Basically for the social part of it, to be honest. I don't really care about the education, to be honest. I care about the social because I saw my older 2 start in daycare as infants and go all through daycare, and now one's in school and one's now home with me. And I can already see an attachment to mom, and I saw that they learned how to take authority from other people other than just me, just by being in school. And so I'm looking for that, and I think that's a huge benefit to a 4-year-old going to school. And, he'll come home and play. It's a half a day of school. He'll come home and play, and I get to still be an influence on him the rest of the day, but I see that. I see a huge benefit of the social aspect. So that's just my opinion, seeing both sides,
Yeah.
So.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Well, and that's a lot of my concern with the 4K is that it's not going to be a social. One of the other things is it's going to become too structured, just like the kindergarten has, that it's going to end up not being play-centered based. They can only absorb so much. They can't. Their attention span, as the experts over here can tell you, 4-year-old maybe 30 seconds.
On a good day.
I mean, they're very short, so they can't have these structures, and that's what the social skills have to be learned at that age, not reading and writing. Just identify a number is good enough, and a letter.
Right.
And it's going to get too structured, and I'm just afraid that we're going to have to, it's not going to be good for the kids.
And remember, it is always an option. I mean, it isn't mandatory, but I think what we know once it's in place, a lot of people are going to fall back on it, I think is what we're talking about here. And that's why it needs to be done right.
Several years ago, there was a survey done in Burlington, just of the kindergarten teachers. And they wanted to know what they want the kids to know when they come into their classroom. And number 1 was like self-regulation, being able to sit, listen, follow directions, all these social skills, getting along with others, negotiating, all these skills that kids don't, well, being at home is great, and if you have siblings, it's great, but you don't learn that unless you're in a community.
Right.
So with the ways, what is expected of kids as they go into kindergarten, 1st grade, and throughout school, if they don't have those skills, they're going to fall. Definitely going to fall. And being at home is great, like I said, but they do need that because they're not going to get it when they get into kindergarten. So they have to have that already, and that's why preschool, I teach 3-year-old and 4-year-old preschool, and it's like, now they need 3-year-old preschool. I didn't used to believe that, even though I taught. I'm like, my kids didn't go to 3-year-old preschool. But now it's like they need it because there's so many expectations on these kids at such a young age. They have to have those things under their belt before they can grasp learning. If they don't have those skills, they can't learn. If there's other things in their mind,
That's right.
they can't learn. They have to have those things under control, be able to sit and listen.
So Tom.
I was just going to simply add to that. I think we've been talking about a lot of the kids that did go through a program and not necessarily addressing the kids who haven't, because like you said, there is a lot expected in 1st grade. I just went through that with Owen, my son. But the even bigger problem is the kids who, like you said, maybe parents can't afford to send them to 4K. That represents a large portion of the kids in the community. And the thing you also forget is the time teachers then have to spend with those kids, getting them up to speed in their kindergarten. And you're right, what is expected of these kids in kindergarten, whether it's right or wrong, but it's a lot. So to get the kids who have had no experience with any of this, whether socializing or not, a lot of attention then has to be placed on those kids in the classroom. So then the kids who did have some exposure to it, they're doing good, but how much better could they be doing that? If more attention was placed on them, because so much attention wouldn't need to be placed on these other kids, how much would we lift up everybody by doing something like that? I think that kind of becomes the question. If we get everybody involved with this, or as much as kids as possible, how do we bring it up, then everybody to that next level?
I think we do probably, I promised that this room would be lights out and everybody gone, equipment out by 8. I mean, could we
Oh, you're
keep
fine.
talking till 7:45,
Yeah,
for
you're
example? Okay.
No questions, just a comment I want to make. Has there been, or maybe a question, has there been any studies that have shown the effects that 4K has had on the preschools in the communities that they've been started in? Because I'm really concerned about that, because I prefer to see something like that stay in the.
I think that like Verona is a great example, because I think they're just 3 or 4 years in place now. I know they have all focused on community approach. They'd be a great one to call and say, you know, is that, it started this way, is it still that way, or is it all of a sudden getting shifted to the buildings, or where, you know, if the facility doesn't meet the requirements, or the teachers aren't, current teachers aren't DPI certified, and the daycare or the preschool doesn't want to bring those in, then, you know, that can create, I guess, a problem depending on the role, and I don't know, but it's a good question. Those are all things that need to be asked and answers found.
Matt, I thought I read on the DPI website that they're all for the community approach.
They are.
Like, do they?
Yes.
Is that part of their, will that, they push it towards that?
They very much push it that way. And you're right, if you go on their website, everything they talk about kind of flows in that direction of wanting to get the community participation and wanting the schools to partner with the providers in the community. That's definitely the way they push the program.
In fact, when the grant money was available and still in place, emphasis was given
Yes.
to the community model.
Preference
So,
was given to that model.
yeah,
They know they do it that way, like in Menominee Falls.
they do. That's right. It's all community, yeah.
Yeah, but they don't have to offer, if it's a community approach, are they having to offer benefits that, like the school districts offer?
I think it's a dollar amount that they get per kid. That's like.
No. Do they have to pay their employees?
That's what I.
Are they dictated at rates that they have to pay their employees, which then jack up the rates for the people who choose to do private?
All the, as I understand, all the preschools get the same amount of money per kid. And then what they do with that, pay, benefits, obviously, has to come under that.
No, but under that K-4, maybe I'm not explaining. Is the state able to come in and dictate what you're paying, or is the community able to come in and dictate what you're paying those staff people?
It would depend on the model. So in those 3 models, he showed if the school district took their person and put it in there, then that would be a district employee.
Your attention, please. The
We
Waterford
want
Library
community
will be
/
closing
community.
in
Versus
approximately 30 minutes.
this school saying here, you get your own person, as long as they're DPI certified. You know, there's some,
Sure, there's
you have credentials, you have to be legitimate, you know, credentialed teacher.
9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
No enough.
On the DPI website, it has all sorts of different research related to 4K. There's 4 different studies, 01, 02, 05. Then they go on to list 7 more different studies, how it affects in a positive way. Of course, they're going to put that on the DPI website, but those are some resources, and they have them all cited too. So.
There are great resources on the DPI website. They've been doing this for a long time, so they do have a lot of stuff there. One independent research article I saw, I think this is worth saying, it said that 4K had a return of investment on like 63 cents on the dollar, and what that was is decreased special education services in later years as those kids were tracked, other issues related to behavior and stuff like that. And Milwaukee was separated out by, Milwaukee had like a 78% or something like that return per dollar. So the interesting thing is, remember that this is a cash positive thing, and then so there are some other, I mean, I'll bring it up because those are all things that you'll find on the DPI website, in addition to the question you originally brought up too. It's a pretty good resource.
And also looking down the road, it's also been noted that children that go to preschool are more likely to go to college, less kids in the judicial system. So, I mean, there's a lot of positives down the road. It's not just now and not just getting into kindergarten. It's long-term. It's important. It's important.
All right, thanks for the opportunity. I just want to stand opposed. And I'll tell you why, guys. I never had any children, all right? So I'm not sure what a 4-year-old can learn, what they can't learn, all right? I just know that my mother spent a lot of time with me at home. My dad worked, she stayed home. We were eating soup 4 times a week, and we learned, all right? We have a school system here that, these numbers were shocking to me, that a good chunk of my taxes and yours all goes to the school district, all right? And in 4 years, they're going to be in a hole $1.5 million, according to your numbers.
No, it was the opposite. They'll have $1.2 million surplus. And that's if you go 5 years back. If you go 5 years forward, they'll have about 1.6 million surplus in the next 5 years. So it's the exact opposite.
I wish you brought my glasses. But anyway, so that was a plus. All right, I guess my question is
Your taxes are going to go down, sir, if we have
well,
4K district.
you're basing this on free money, all right? Money that can dry up any time. All right, that's the part that worries me. What happens years ago will not necessarily happen next year or the year after. And what happens then? You know, and that's the part that bothers me. We have, the Waterford School District, I think, is in our pockets enough. All right?
Sir, I don't want to cut you short.
No, go ahead.
A few more, but I do want to have this be a little bit more of a question and answer.
All right, well, that's
Not
just
so
my
much-
opinion.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't understand why 4-year-olds have to go to school at a cost of $80,000 for a teacher and for an aide. And I just don't see it.
They don't have to, it's voluntary. He said it was voluntary.
I thought it was voluntary to enroll.
No, they don't have to.
They don't have, they can stay home, they can stay home.
The whole
eat soup,
program
get
is-
trained at home and
And
have
if you've
their
got
parents-
someone that's there to do it, you don't have to send. That was my concern. I didn't want it to be something mandatory, because I agree. I think 4-year-olds belong at home.
Yeah, it's
If
fine.
So,
there's a way
okay,
for them to be.
so if you have a class of 10 people in there, you have a teacher getting paid and an aide $80,000?
yeah, we need jobs. You know, we
The
gotta-
cost of the
You know,
district,
this is what this is where I don't understand.
Part of that, the math he put up there, is assuming the maximum. Let's say that every kid that was eligible, or most of the majority, wanted to take advantage of the program, then we would need X number of teachers. That was representation of that. You may be right, and it may be only 10 kids in the entire district that would want to take advantage of it. Chances are that wouldn't happen, but let's say it did. You wouldn't hire 4 teachers and 4 aides then. You would adjust it down to what you needed. And if enrollment dropped in the future, then you would drop the number of teachers you needed. Just like we do now as enrollment goes down, we adjust the number of teachers we need. If enrollment goes up, we get more teachers. So this is making assumptions. But at the end of the day, the biggest assumption is that if we do this, we get more aid from the state that we're already paying as taxpayers. It's just going to other districts.
But you may not get it. It may just dry up also. Right?
Well,
I mean, everybody's talking,
yeah,
so,
let's move.
yeah, I'm gonna move on because this is for you guys. The
Yeah.
bottom line is, that's my
Yeah.
opinion. There's just too much out there I don't know about, and maybe I saw your numbers wrong. I'm sorry, I didn't have my glasses. The bottom line is, you mentioned a tax increase, you mentioned, well, then a bigger tax increase.
I think-
If we didn't have it.
I think
you
he's
know what
referenced before, after.
Yeah, well,
is
whatever.
what he's
The bottom
looking
line
at.
is, you know, how much can come out of your pocket? And this is for 4-year-olds. You know, come on, mom and dad.
But just before you leave, though, sir, just to want you to know, it's less out of your pocket if we have a 4K program.
If the money still comes in from the state,
Right.
and that could dry up.
Well, it's been there for 30 years, and I don't
Oh,
think
yeah,
that.
it's been a Democratic state forever, too. You know what I mean? Then we got Scott Walker, he did a lot of things to you guys. You know, why can't he stop other things? You know, no disrespect to Mr. Walker, I'm a fan of his. So, guys, thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you.